There are a lot of productivity books out there, and blog articles, and videos, and TikToks, and YouTube shorts, and LinkedIn posts, and Instagram reels, and you can't forget podcasts. Oh, yeah, and online courses, and it goes on and on. So much advice. What are you actually going to do with it? Honestly, a lot of the time you probably hear or read advice and you're like, maybe I should do that. And then it just floats on by and you forget about it. Or maybe you give it a go. And then what's that like? Let's say you heard on a podcast that you should have a shutdown sequence for the end of your day. Okay. So the next day, you get to the time when you're supposed to do your shutdown routine, but you didn't leave time for it. And now you got to go pick up your kid from practice and then blip, the day goes by without doing your shutdown routine. Oops. All right. I'll try again tomorrow. This time you remind yourself, and lo and behold, you sit down and you do that shutdown routine. But it's kind of clunky because the advice you're working with tells you to log out of your software and close all your browser tabs, but you've got important stuff saved on those browser tabs and you don't have a place to put them. So you just skip over that part. And then it tells you to go through your email inbox to make sure you don't have any loose threads. But that feels kind of more like diving into new stuff instead of closing out the end of the day. So you get kind of discouraged and frustrated, and it just doesn't feel good. You stumble through the rest of the recommended routine and you leave feeling kind of unsatisfied. But you said you would do it, so you're going to try it again tomorrow. But then tomorrow comes and you have this vague, icky feeling from yesterday, and you say to yourself, oh, yeah, I'll get started tomorrow. But then tomorrow comes and you got to pick up your kid from practice again. And then there goes another failed attempt at making yourself more productive and taking on productivity advice. It can be really demoralizing when we think we would be more happy or successful or more efficient or more whatever if we could just do the recommended method, but we can't stick to it. We think we are the failure. Now, there's a better way. It does take a little bit more time, a little bit more focus, but since that time and focus you gave to that failed shutdown sequence attempt was kind of wasted, what have you got to lose? I truly believe that a little bit of extra effort pays dividends. So let's dive into my 4-step method for making the most out of productivity advice out there. It's going to sound a little bit extra when I talk it through, but it's actually kind of short. So let's dive in. Welcome back to the channel, my productivity pals. This is You to Do You, where we talk about how to make productivity advice work for you. It's all about customizing and finding what works for you, your life, your brain. I want you to adopt the productivity methods, hacks, tools, techniques, whatever you call them, that actually help you and make your life better. So let's dive into this 4-step method. The 4 P's is what I like to call it. Premise. What problem are you actually trying to solve? Now, this first step is actually optional. We'll call it like step 0. In this step, we clarify for ourselves the premise. What is the technique or tool that we're trying to adopt actually supposed to do for us? Why are we bothering with this? I say it's optional because you might be someone who just likes to dive in and find out. You'll figure out what is there for you when you get there. And I'm all for that. But if you're someone who likes to be guided by principles and the why behind things, then you might want to take a moment to get clear on that. So let's continue with this example of a shutdown sequence. I actually tested out a shutdown sequence for myself in preparation for this video so we could have some fresh examples of this method. So in the case of this shutdown ritual, routine, whatever you want to call it, I did some reading and research, and I discovered that there are 2 main problems that a shutdown ritual is trying to solve, or maybe 2 like overarching results that it's trying to give you. A sense of doneness to your workday so you can shut off your brain, turn off any ruminating or worrying about your work, and just enjoy your evening. And B, setting you up for tomorrow, like or the next few days by regrouping, tidying, resetting. So now that I know what we're trying to achieve here, I can move on to step 1, plan. Set the terms of the experiment. So what will you actually be expecting yourself to do? Depending on the nature of things, establishing this might be done in, pretty short order, or maybe figuring out the behavior that you expect to change and are setting yourself up for might be a mini project in and of itself that you need to dedicate some time to, which may mean putting it on your projects list or your to-do list, or just blocking out some time on your calendar for it. In any case, in this step, we are actually setting up ourselves for what we expect ourselves to do. You might say, I'm going to do a shutdown ritual, but let's get a little more specific than that. What does your first draft of a shutdown ritual actually look like? In the case of my shutdown ritual experiment, I read 5 different articles. I looked through my library for references in my books. I watched a half dozen videos. I took notes. I came up with a collection of options based on all of that. Now, you're probably not the productivity nerd like I am that sort of has an extreme appetite for all that. You probably don't want to do all that research. But by the way, in case you are interested, I'll leave my list of resources in the description box below. But in any case, you're just going to gather what you can, perhaps starting with that first source that gave you the idea to do this shutdown ritual or whatever it is that you're working on. Then just take a quick moment to add your own brainstorms to it. Consider your actual circumstances and what might apply to you. In my case, I thought about how a typical day for me goes, and in that context, how a shutdown ritual might serve the needs of settling my brain down and teeing me up for a better tomorrow. I jotted down some other notes, kind of a rough first draft. Maybe I'll reschedule some things that didn't get done today, check my email one last time, process some meeting notes. From there, you can kind of make your own version. I looked over my rough draft and definitely saw that it had way too many things for every day. I couldn't do a shutdown ritual that long every day. So from there, I made a more refined list. And again, we're not looking for a perfect version here. This is draft 1.0. We're just getting a good hypothesis of what would work for you in, taking on this new technique or tool. Okay, so in my case, I came down to kind of a first draft and I wrote that list out on a card and I put it on my desk and I propped it up against my little pen cup so I wouldn't miss it. And so that was my best guess of how this tool was going to work for me, the first draft of adapting it for my use. As a side note, this may be a phase where some questions burble up. For example, in my planning, I found myself asking, the trick is that I tend to work until I'm tired of working or because I have something to scoot off to, something else to do. So how will I know that I'm 10 minutes from being tired? Do I set an alarm? Do I rely on my time blocks? Do I just take a break and then come back to it? Also, I don't always end my day at my desk. So sometimes my work day could end up by me cooking or exercising, but that doesn't mean I can't come back to my desk and do my shutdown routine. So maybe I do it after a break. There were questions. So before we move on to the next step, let me just say that aside from doing this kind of excessive amounts of nerdy reading, the act of doing this planning was actually quite quick. Don't let all this planning deter you. It can take like 10 minutes just with you and your journal and a scrap of paper. Okay, so now you've got your plan. Let us prepare. How/when will you actually do it? Do you remember that scenario I described earlier? You wanted to do the shutdown ritual, but you got derailed because you forgot that you have to pick up your kid from practice after work, and you blew past the time when a closing ritual would happen. So this is the step when we're going to help you avoid getting derailed like that. We're going to set the stage so you have a much bigger chance of success. It involves 3 questions, and guess what? They're all P questions too. First, provisions. Do I have any materials or resources I need to make this happen? Let's jump away from the shutdown sequence for a second. So maybe I'm going to try a daily 10-minute yoga sequence at my desk, and I want to get a yoga strap to stretch my arms. Or maybe I'm going to try putting major deadlines on a wall to help me plan for them, and I need a large calendar and markers to do that. This preparation moment is a time for you to gather those materials or put it on your to-do list or your calendar to get those materials, or maybe delegate someone else on your team to get those materials. In any case, we're gathering our provisions. In the case of the shutdown ritual, I only needed this little card by my computer to remind me what the sequence was, but you might need a place to write notes or a timer to help you keep the sequence just to 20 minutes, whatever it may be. Those are just some examples. Next P question here, people. Do you need to inform or coordinate with anyone? Maybe ask your assistant to keep those deadlines on the big wall calendar updated, for example. Or here's another scenario. Maybe you're experimenting with sitting in the car for 10 minutes and breathing as a transition before you go into the house after getting home from work. If that's the case, maybe you need to let people you live with know so they're not confused about why the car is parked, but you're not coming in. Or in the case of the shutdown ritual, maybe you need to let your clients know that you won't be available for meetings after 5:30. In my case, with this shutdown sequence, I work solo, so I didn't have to tell anybody, but I did consider blocking some time off on my calendar. And last, but certainly not least in the prepare step, is the question about prompt. Prompt. What triggers this action? This is super important. What will actually prompt you into doing this new behavior? You're not super likely to suddenly start doing your shutdown ritual, let alone doing it at the right time if you've never done it before. So, what will get you going? Is it time in your calendar? Will it be paired with something you're already doing? Will you do it with a buddy? Will you use a phone notification? Michael Hyatt, author of Free to Focus, he has his office lights turned automatically off at 6 p.m. So he has to do the shutdown before that. He just knows it's coming. For my shutdown sequence, this was actually kind of a challenge because I don't end my day at the same time every day, in the same way every day. In fact, as you'll see in the next step, I had to kind of iterate this, play with it. My schedule does not jive with me ending the day at the same time and in the same way every day. Before I move on to step 4, I'm guessing that if you watched this far, you're getting something out of this video. If so, can you pop down and tap that like button? It really helps YouTube know to suggest this video to others who might like it. Thanks. Okay, so the next step, ponder. Reflect on the results. I like this step. This step is the secret sauce. I want you to leave a little bit of time for reflection. I recommend that every time you start a productivity experiment, you add on the extra habit of journaling or making notes of the results. If you already have a journaling practice, you could just add to that. Or if you keep a paper planner, you can make notes there. Or if it's, say, part of a startup sequence to check in with yourself about your previous day. Or, there's any number of times when you might pause, maybe immediately after the intended practice, part of your startup day. Maybe you're a journaler in the morning, or maybe you always have a notebook with you. And just, if you're stuck on hold or you have a few spare minutes, you can use the time to jot down, some notes about how the experiment is going. If journaling is something you don't like doing or you just can't get yourself to do, you could talk into a voice memo, or you could get together with a friend and share your reflections verbally. These are just some ideas. The point is, I want you to find a time to reflect. That could be if you already have a time in your life when you do reflect, you could just add on to that, or you could set aside specific time, or you could have a prompt like you're always waiting on hold, or you're visiting with a productivity pal to do that reflection. In any case, what's included in that reflection, in that journaling? Let's think about that for a moment. First, make note of what you actually did. Did I actually do the elements of the sequence that I set out to do in the planning step? How long did it take? That sort of thing. Then add some observations. This worked well, that didn't. I didn't end up using this element. That part was surprisingly useful. Oh, I didn't know I would feel like this or that, or that sort of thing. Then let some questions bubble up. Get curious about how things will go the next day when circumstances change. Be sure to reflect on the days you didn't do this behavior also. The so-called failures tell us at least as much about how the experiment is going as the successes do. In the kindest way possible, ask yourself why you didn't do it. I didn't need it. I forgot about it. The alarm didn't go off. The prompt that I thought was going to prompt me didn't prompt me. I didn't have time for it. I ran out of energy. I didn't have the right resources, supplies, tools, environment. I forgot to tell my people and I got interrupted. So you can learn a lot from this reflection about why it didn't work. So you don't discount the days where this new to you sequence didn't happen. In the description box below, I'll share a Notion template and a Google Sheet template of these journal questions that you can copy and use for yourself. So for my shutdown sequence experiment, I kept a journal right after I did the shutdown sequence. This worked because it was fresh in my mind and I had the time. And remember, this is all an experiment. We're being playful and just testing things out. We wait to firm things up until we know more about this productivity technique in the context of our style, our life, our circumstances, our vibe. After we learn about it, how it works for us, then we can customize it to work for our own needs. At that point, we will have demonstrated to ourselves what works and why it works. And from there, it actually won't be that hard to adopt. In fact, you'll probably be excited about it and craving for more because you see that it's working. In this case, after about 10 days of giving my shutdown sequence a real go, I know that I have an established tool and a tool that I'm friends with, a tool that actually really does feel like mine. But surprisingly, I learned that it's not a tool I have to use every day to feel successful or productive. This is counter to Andrew Haberman, Cal Newport, Tim Ferriss, all those guys who promote all or nothing daily ritual thinking that you must do. Now, we're going to be realistic, customized, and kind. Sure, their systems are full of good ideas that you can borrow, but you don't have to take it on as it's packaged up to you. So I'm curious, do you have any experiments you want to run? Any productivity techniques that you're going to give a try? Heck, do you want to customize my tool for customizing tools? Let us know in the comments below. Or if you'd like some one-on-one help with your productivity challenges, you'll find my website in the description box below and on the screen, and you can just message me to get started. If you want to hear more about productivity experiments, check out the playlist that I should be hovering on the screen somewhere here. It's where I test out the Ivy Lee method, elastic habits, and more. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.